To build a really big company, you have to start small. And we've seen that almost every successful company starts by finding this initial killer wedge. It's not product market fit, it's not go-to-market strategy, it's that initial high velocity market where you can build a simple product, the niche, almost sometimes a niche within a niche. Finding that killer wedge is just this tailwind to success. This stuff is not really accidental, it's very deliberate. Think of this like a menu of different options to explore. And there's going to be others, but this initial set of like, here's a dozen ideas for you to think about how do you get that initial killer wedge going. So one of the perhaps most familiar initial wedges is where there's a dense, highly networked group of individuals or customers that can experience your product and then spread it rapidly. And the famous examples are often college campuses, where there's a group of people that are very open to new products and new experiences and will share things rapidly. So you've probably seen the film Social Network, the story of Facebook. They use the domain of the top universities. They started at Harvard and then kind of went down to other places.
Why do you need my laptop? Because you got emails for everybody in Phoenix.
So you know that you've really managed to kind of engineer virality within that initial network. But it's huge, rapid early adoption in a bunch of early influencers. They could span into these much bigger markets later on. So for many individuals, as well as many companies, cash is king. The instant liquidity wedge, where you're giving money or you're managing cash flows in a very thoughtful way, which is carefully underwritten, can be very attractive to expand into other markets. Part of the reason is that to do this initial kind of underwriting, you need a lot of data. So another way to think about this is not just lending money, but it's also just shortening financial cycles. And that can be a great initial wedge to get a bunch of data, but then move into additional vectors over time to really expand the market, defensibility, and often the value of those revenues over time. So another wedge that has seen a ton of success is the rapid feedback wedge, where you really start with what you might think of an MVP, have a large amount of customers that are just using your product. Get that feedback, improve the product, ship it again. And so they're generally excited and tolerant of that change.
We actually built it in like 6 to 7 months. Got it out, it wasn't perfect, but I was really proud of us doing that. And then iterating out in the open with our customer base, who gave us feedback and helped us steer the direction.
And then over time, move from these teams using this product into departments using this product into enterprises using that product. And that kind of lower threshold of spend as well as feature requirements is a great way to get going and to really get this rapid adoption.
We really try to put ourselves in the position of our customers and try different techniques for that.
That cycle of like learning, improvement, getting this rapid feedback not only improves the product, but also you're moving at a very rapid rate, which is characteristic of all the great startups that we backed. There's two groups of customers. Like one is the perhaps businesses that say, well, I want to sell more product. I'm unable to serve this existing market over here just because I haven't got around to it. And if there's a company that comes along and says, well, I can sell you your product to these customers, which you're not currently serving, it's like, great, sign me up. So Booking.com did this to great effect, where they initially said, well, you're selling domestically through your network of travel agents, back really before the internet. But if you're able to open up, it's a very clear complementary channel for you to sell your product. In other markets, there's underserved customer segments which new products can come in and break through. Airtable, which is, you could say, is like an Excel on steroids.
Look, we don't just want to be another simple collaboration product. Neither do we want to just go and like be a heads-on feature by feature competitor to these big monolithic app platforms or big enterprise solutions.
And so by targeting this kind of prosumer or more professional use case was really an underserved market, which they went after. You could also look at Discord, a niche communications tool for the gaming industry.
When we started Discord, we were very focused on creating a place for people who played games with their friends.
Which expanded to kind of build this horizontal platform. And so finding these kind of like niche markets which can expand into these much bigger markets over time is a really effective way to build an initial wedge and build a massive business. The 10x ROI wedge is, you ask yourself, is this a nice to have or is this a must have? Is this an aspirin or is this a vitamin? Starlink when it comes to rural internet, whether it's Robinhood when it comes to stock trading. 10x ROI is when you can present the product and it's radically, 10x better than the next nearest alternative. Back for me when it was Truly and Zillow, kind of when it comes for researching kind of real estate information. It's a radically better product experience, which can really break through and build a huge market in and of itself and pull customers into that new market. And so we see many startups that are successful start with this underserved market, underserved niche. They look at this initial market and refine and build an incredible product for that underserved niche, and then use that to expand into these more valuable markets over time. Airbnb is the kind of like classic example here. It's like, clearly you've seen the evolution of that business to dominate the hospitality industry. And so starting in these initial markets, they're uncompetitive, they're underserved. If you're obsessed with the details, you can build a delightful experience. And if you're really thoughtful about market expansion, you can move out of that initial wedge into these much more valuable markets. Many startups founders are probably familiar with the Tesla master plan, which Elon Musk penned many, many years ago, right at the beginning of Tesla, to say, well, the initial master plan is to start with a wedge, which we call the premium launch wedge, which is focused on a high premium product that's highly visible to an incredibly rich customer base. In this case, it was the Roadster, which was like an electric sports car, and that enabled them to essentially fund R&D.
You're not just buying a sports car, you're actually helping pay for development of the mass market vehicles.
Into building a kind of a more mass market vehicle with lower specs and start that initial market. And so there's certain markets where we can find these initial premium wedges, the high status, high margin, rich customers that can essentially fund your R&D into other categories as well. The compliance wedge is all about simplifying the thing that your customer absolutely cannot afford to get wrong. Spaces like compliance, taxes, legal, or security can often be good wedges for companies looking to gain a foothold in B2B SaaS markets. Customers are always ready to adopt solutions that alleviate their anxieties and mitigate potential disasters within their companies. Rippling, Intuit, and Okta began by easing compliance burdens of HR, taxes, and user authentication. By addressing complex regulations, you can build trust and loyalty, setting the stage for broader solutions down the road. You could think of this as like making money out of something which is just generating no revenue for you at all. Two very significant examples here. One is in the gig economy, where you saw a bunch of companies, whether that's Poshmark, focused on the clothes in your closet that you're not wearing, Uber, TaskRabbit, DoorDash, which are really using your underutilized time to monetize. It could also exist in kind of B2B as well. So the story of AWS, Amazon Web Services, they built this infrastructure which the utilization was much lower through the rest of the year. And so they shared the infrastructure with a bunch of other companies. And so they had this kind of massive economic investment where they were able to monetize through other ways.
We faced no like-minded competition for 7 years.
So we see this as a very popular wedge and a very interesting wedge for companies to enter a market or existing companies to find new markets. Find a complex, annoying, complicated process and then take the friction out of that process. So one big company that many people know about is Plaid, which provides integration between financial information systems, so consumers accessing the financial information, one service, and sharing it with another service. And to do that in a real-time, trusted, secure way is just incredibly complicated and painful. And so automating and simplifying that process and doing it at scale could build this massive platform business. And you're getting into these money flows, which starts to become extremely attractive. And because it's integrated, and because there's a platform network effect, becomes incredibly sticky in these massive, massive markets. So for certain industries and certain products, where you start from a reputation perspective is incredibly important. And so you can imagine if Facebook hadn't started at Harvard or Snapchat hadn't really started at Stanford, then would it have been as kind of like successful as it was? If LinkedIn had been started by a bunch of Silicon Valley veterans who are highly networked, would have been successful. And for these, sort of, particularly on social networks, where you start can really be a magnet for other people to join. Similarly, you often see in kind of some B2B businesses, like capturing some kind of high value marquee clients can be super valuable in terms of building reputation to attract other clients. And particularly in these network businesses, these social signals can be really important in capturing that velocity and capturing that growth and starting in the right place. Somewhere of high status, high reputation can be initial critical wedge, as long as you're able to navigate out of that initial wedge into these much bigger markets. The transparency wedge, really about helping deliver to businesses and consumers access to information. Consumers incredibly curious. There's huge amounts of information out there in the world, but packaging that data, present that data, allowing access to the information can give enormous kind of insights and viewership.
We're like, well, this is really illuminating, being able to see all this great data and being able to build spreadsheets with comps and do an analysis ourselves. Like, that's empowering.
But access to information in itself is often not a great business model. And so finding that information, sharing that information, and then figuring out how to monetize that information can be a great strategy. So it can often be user-generated or free content, but it's the curation, the presentation, the insights that build on top of that really add the value. There are companies that have proprietary databases of information themselves that they've built up over the years, but providing access to that information can be a real great wedge into potentially new adjacent businesses for those existing businesses.